This is the Sex Ed for You podcast, where research meets reality.
And we're your hosts, Lauren and Holland.
This is the podcast for people who want to date and have great sex that is safe, fun, and enjoyable.
We aim to empower our listeners to make informed decisions that lead to values-based living. I'm Holland, and I have a Bachelor of Science in Public Health, and I'm the Director of Operations here at Sex Ed for You.
And I'm Lauren, a Certified Holistic Sexuality Educator and the proud owner of Sex Ed for You.
Lauren works with individuals, partners, and parents to restore positive and respectful approaches to sexuality, pleasure, and relationships.
To work one-on-one with me, go to sexedforyou.com/free consult to request a free 15-minute consult today, or consider joining our monthly membership program, Hemlock.
Through monthly journaling prompts, an exclusive podcast, and virtual gatherings, the Hemlock Monthly Membership Program provides an accessible way to learn about sexuality and self.
It is a continual source of nutrients to help you nurture and re-access your sexuality and flourish personally for just $10 a month. To learn more, go to sexedforyou.com/hemlock today. I don't know if this is part of on the podcast, but y'all, I couldn't tell this on the partnership podcast because you'd be like, you can't say that. Holland and I were running errands the other day. It's becoming our new Tuesday thing that we have our meetings while we're out in the world. Because the rest of the week, I am not out in the world. I'm meeting with you. Love it with my whole heart and soul. But so it's kind of fun now. It's becoming a standing routine.
We're manifesting it.
We're manifesting it. So last week, yeah, we needed gas before we did our errands. So we pull into the Sheets, for those on the East Coast. That's like our big gas station. And I start it. Yeah. And I run the card, and we get back in the car and we're talking. And then Holland's like, I'll close it out. Totally fine. And get the receipt. Great. She gets the receipt. She closes the gas tank. We leave the gas station. We make this big left turn through a four-way, very big intersection.
One of the biggest ones here, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a small town.
Yeah,
so.
but it's one of the few very large
There's 4 lanes of traffic. Yeah, there's lots of lanes.
Yeah.
And so we make this turn, and we hear something.
Like a noise,
rattle pop, like a rattle tip. And I'm like, what was that?
I was like, I don't know.
And then it hit me that my gas cap, I guess that's the term you would use, its little doohickey that attaches it to the car broke a long time ago. And so I just manually screw it in and then manually unscrew it. Sounds really
And she sets
nasty.
it on top of
and
the
then
car.
I set it on top of the car. Now, these are things you do without even thinking. Holland wouldn't have known.
No,
There's no way.
I just thought it was one of those fancy ones that it doesn't have one because it just closes itself, because it also does that. It also has the little uvula thing in the esophageal
speaking
flat.
in sex code.
We're not. No.
Yeah, it does have it's got a thing.
What is epiglottis? It has an epiglottis.
So we hear it roll, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's what it is. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, you couldn't have known. So we turn into the Aldi to try to go back and get it out of the middle. She thought she was going to go back. My intent was maybe we'll hit the red light and everybody will have been stopped, and I'll run out into the middle of the intersection and be like, stop. And I'll get our gas cap.
No. And I'm this whole time thinking, why the fuck is she pulling over?
So I turned around. No sooner do we get into the parking lot, you hear this bop, and an 18-wheeler had run over.
Yeah. And it was shattered in pieces. But then today
or yesterday, an Amazon package comes, and I'm like, what's that? And Trey's sitting in our little tiny little booth. It's not a booth. Thing in the kitchen. And he's like, oh, come here. And I'm like, what?
Come here.
And he hands me this Amazon package, and I'm feeling it. And he's just looking at me. He's like, yeah.
I know exactly
No one sees it on the screen, but he is the cutest little sweetie pie.
Sweetest.
And so then I'm like, I don't know what this is. And so I open it. He'd already opened it. So I drop it out of the package, and it's a gas cap, because I told him the story. All I had done is told him the story.
Yeah.
Nothing. I had not said, do you want? I was like, I don't know. I'll get one when I get one. And so I kind of get teary, and he goes and pulls me into him. Of which then I'm like squashed on this little bench with him in the kitchen. And he starts crying. Like, not weeping, but like crying.
Yeah, a few tears.
Tears. And I'm like, baby, are you okay? And he's like, I'm just so happy. Y'all listen. If you also go through a season of your life sucking, you listen to me. It could get really good in about
just
10
give it a
years.
few months.
Yeah, just hang in there. It really, I think we need to. We were saying this today when we were driving around. Like, we do get to define our desires. We do. It sometimes takes the sifting through life and saying what we. This is what we said on the podcast last week, right? It's less about why don't I want that or I don't want that, more about what do I want? And that is hard.
Yeah.
Choice is hard. I get it. And wow, it can be really good. People can get you gas caps and everyone be crying and joking and laughing, and there was no yelling when it went flying into it's like, it doesn't matter.
You and Trey were meant to have that special little crying moment
right?
in the kitchen.
We were. So yeah, that was sweet.
And then I immediately was like, God, why does Trey not have a little brother?
It would be so great. It really would be. Who knows?
Maybe he has a long lost sire out there. So.
He has said that a couple times, because, that segues perfectly into today's topic. It really does. Because for those who don't know, my sweet partner had a very sexually active past, and I love it. And yeah, he will randomly be like, wouldn't it be crazy? I guess a show we were watching the other day, like somebody knocked on the door, right? And was like,
You're my daddy.
You're my daddy. It happens on shows. It happens in real life too, but it happened on the show. And he was like, wouldn't that be wild?
And like, not all that shocking.
And then it was cute because then we had a whole conversation because he was like, what would we do? And literally I looked at him. He's like, yeah, of course we'd take him in. They would be our child. It would be wonderful.
He's just dreaming in the distance.
Yeah.
I could see him like staring off. And we get like a whole cut scene of Trey's life with his young boy.
He doesn't want it. And he's always known he didn't want to be a father. And yet he adores working with kids, and he adores building relationships. He worked as a coach for a football team for the longest time. And yeah, it's like, no, he wouldn't purposely choose it. But if it chose him, he would rise to the occasion.
It's such a cool thing to know about yourself too. Like, I love that aspect of Trey, that he just knows that he doesn't want his own kids and yet embraces relationship with young adults and kids. And yeah, it's just really cool to see him embrace that.
I just always get frustrated when that piece of the conversation is left out. Like, that's an okay desire. Not to want to have your own children is a beautiful and purposeful decision to make. And in the worlds I grew up in, it was looked upon as selfish, which is then very confusing when people inside of religious cultures want to try to get pregnant, can't. Then it's like, wait, am I selfish? Like, all the things I've ever heard. It creates a very confusing narrative. And I think sometimes knowing your own healing process is really wise. I was telling one of my best friends about him not wanting kids, yada, yada. And yeah, long story short, I said, but the same thing. I know he would rise to the occasion. And she said, yeah, and then he'd have some work to do. And I was like, oh, right. And she said, yeah, on the amount of alone time he gets right now. Yeah. Because that changes. And I was like, exactly, right? So for someone to know how sensitive they are and how easily their resiliency is zapped, how easily their battery is drained, that is not a weakness. That's a strength to know ourselves.
I'd argue it's more selfish to have kids, knowing that you would not necessarily not be a good parent, but like just not necessarily want to carve out space for a kid in your life. I think that's more selfish to have kids without purposefully carving out space for them. I think we see a lot of neglect in those situations.
Yeah. Again, if you listen to this podcast and you had children out of, this feeling that it was your obligation to have children and now they exhaust you, hey, we see you. It's okay.
Yeah,
you're going to be great. Your kids are going to be great. Everybody's going to be great. It's fine. These are the stories we get to tell, but I do think it is cool to watch someone who just knew that about themselves and Yeah.
It's also fun. It's fun for me because I'm in a state of like in between. Like I don't know necessarily if I want kids or not. I was talking to my mom about this actually the other day about like, I think it just is going to take the right person to come into my life to make me feel safe enough to want to have kids with them, because I know that I would potentially like to have kids if I felt like my partner was equally invested in raising them and spending time with them, because I grew up saying a lot of women take almost the entirety of raising children on their backs, and I don't want that. I think it's incredible for the people who want it. I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to pursue my passions. I want to feel like I can travel and I'm not going to have to like find care for my kid because, you know, my partner would take care of them. Like, anyway, so I definitely am in that like, I don't know stage. And I think for me, it would take the right partner who is also equally committed to raising that kid for me. And if not, I'm truly okay with not having kids. So that's where I'm at.
That's what we call an informed decision making. Oh, gentle audience, because it's what Holland is saying is given the right information, given the information, she would make a decision based upon that information. And I think when we're like, do you want kids? It's like, yes, well, Holland should know that. For some people, it's a make or break.
Yeah.
For some people,
100%.
they truly are like, no, I want to find a partner who wants children.
And wants to raise those children. I've dated guys like that.
Beautiful.
And they've been like,
Great.
I want, you know, a wife who's going to be stay at home and takes care of our kids. And I'm like, great, that's not me. That's so good for you. At least you know what you want and you can say that and you don't expect that out of me without stating it.
Yeah.
Because not stating it and then expecting it 5 years into the relationship, fear. Speaking of that.
So we got the other day on Instagram, I was just loving on y'all because so much of the subject matter that we get is from our Instagram audience. So if you don't follow us, go to Instagram. We're at sex_ed_for_you. And yeah, occasionally I'll put up a question box that's like, hey, do you have any subjects for us? And always feel free to send us a DM. A lot of our best subject content has come from DMs.
Probably because we're most passionate about the fact that we're responding to real people.
Yeah, we like real people.
We really like to respond to people.
Yeah, that's why. Thank you, Holland.
It's not that it just makes good content. It's just that we are so passionate about helping individuals.
Yeah. This work is like our favorite thing. Yeah. I wasn't going to get teary. Anyway, one of y'all said, and I thought this was such a great subject, could you talk about committed/monogamous relationships in your early 20s versus dating around open relationships, non-committed relationships? Yeah. Friends with benefits, dating casually, all of these types of things, which I think is such a good topic, especially for a podcast that labels itself as being the podcast for people who want to date and have fun sex.
Great sex that is safe and fun.
Uh-huh. That. And it's something that comes up with clients all the time. Yeah. For those that don't know, the first step in working with me, one of our very first things we do is do a sexual timeline. And oftentimes it gives us this ability to look back on our lives and go, wow, wish I had been dating casually then. I was married at 21, so boy, do I wish I'd been dating casually then. And learning what I liked and didn't like, and if I even wanted to do a monogamy. There's just so much that I could have learned. And so clients are doing this all the time. But Holland lit up when I pitched this topic to her. So first and foremost, like, why'd you light up when I mentioned this topic?
Because I think it's so situational and nuanced.
She loves nuance.
I love nuance. And it's fun for me because I know that we can't give a straight answer. And I love when we can't give a straight answer because that means y'all have to go home and you have to think about it yourself. Journal about it, whatever we say, I know that it might, trigger a light bulb in somebody or be like, oh, to somebody else. So for me, it's exciting because I'm like, haha, you don't get a yes or no. Like, you need to go home and think. And then also, like, I was in a long-term relationship in college. And I also casually dated in college. So I have both, which is fun. And I'm still in my early 20s. So I just feel like I'm kind of in the midst of it. Yeah. So I feel like I can give a lot of perspective to the situation. First and foremost, it's going to be different for everybody.
Every single body.
There is literally no way to know which one is right or wrong. I think the only way you would be able to know is to listen to yourself. Like, sit there, kind of do what Lauren does with like the yes, no day, but literally be like, okay, do I want to be monogamous? Do I want to only date this one person? Like, things like that, like kind of just testing out, what do you want? Because I think that's the real problem. The problem isn't, should I be monogamous? Should I be casually dating in my early 20s? The problem is you don't know what you want. Mm-hmm. So like, sit down and figure out what it is. Because if you want to casually date to lead yourself to find like, you know, your perfect partner, then so be it. But so other people don't want to do that. I have a lot of friends who are married already, and I'm 23. So a lot of my friends are around 23, 24, 25. And a lot of them are already married. I also have friends who are 27 and 28 and still casually dating. It really just depends on who you are, what you want.
Yeah. And, you know, so much of this is so deep. I'm reading a book about open relationships that was written by a counselor a couple of years back that was recommended in school. And I remember people quoting it all the time, and I'd just never taken the time to like really dig into it. And it's so good. I'll have Holland link it in the comments. So if you're interested in pursuing kind of a deeper level of, wait, there's a different option as opposed to just dating one person, I could do this ethically and in a way that is trauma informed and acknowledges my attachment style, acknowledges my abandonment wounds, acknowledges what I've come from, then there are beautiful, expansive ways to do this. But I think Holland's exactly right? What do you want? And also, in your season of life, what do you want? Are you looking for companionship? Are you looking for consistency? Are you looking to split rent with somebody? Are you looking, I mean, there's so many things.
There's so many things. Like, most recently, just use myself as an example all the time.
Early 20s example.
I am a great early 20s example. A friend of mine, trying to think about how to explain this. We had kind of dated a little bit and then decided to be just friends with benefits. But that happened because I sat down and thought, what do I want with this person specifically? Which I think is a great question to ask yourself, because I knew with this person specifically that we would not be good in long-term partnership. I knew that there was no like long-term future with us. But we are wonderful friends. We love each other, love to hang out, love to grab dinner, love to go to art museums and do fun things like that. And right now, what I'm looking for is companionship.
Yep.
And so, and another thing about this situation was that he's likely moving away in a few months. And so I was like, oh, you know what would be good? What I want out of this? I don't really want to date anybody else right now. I don't really want to pursue having sex with anybody else right now. What if we just did exclusivity until you leave? And so for me, that sounded really good in my body. That was definitely something that I would be okay with, because I knew that long-term partnership wouldn't really work. And I, was happy. I would be happy with friends with benefits, but, then it introduces like, oh, are we having sex with other people? And there's jealousy. And so I considered all of these things, went to him. We had this conversation, and he was not okay with that. He didn't want that. He was like, well, do you want to have kids? Do you want to get married? And I was like, no. And so it was interesting to see, like, we are the same people in the same situation. It's still me and him. I saw this thing that I was okay with. He's not okay with that. He is looking for a partner, like a long-term marriage and babies partner, and that person's not me. So we ended up not doing that. But I had to go through all of those stages of thinking and processing and understanding that we would not be a good long-term relationship together. Because if I was old Holland, maybe a year or two ago, I would have been like, yeah, I'll have your babies. Sure. Like, knowing probably like, oh, I'll do anything to make him like me, And so I think it's really important that I had already done that check-in with myself and already known before going into that conversation with him, I don't really think that long-term partnership is good for us too. So there's an example.
It was so well done, y'all. Obviously, she's brilliant, but like, it was so well done. And she's told me before, and I've even seen in her before, she can paint the end of the story, right? Which is what makes her such a good employee. But we've talked about this before. Her like Enneagram 4-ness can be like, and then this could happen, right? Like this, and it's so beautiful. And in business, oh, it's amazing because it was funny. We were checking in. We're hosting a workshop next week. Well, it have already happened when it'll be coming out right now. Yes.
Yeah. We'll be in the workshop when this comes out.
This is weird. This is like Inception. Right now, we're doing a workshop. Weird. Okay. And she and I were doing a check-in about the workshop. And I said, I feel like we should review roles, just making sure that things are clear. But before I say what I expect you're doing, do you want to just tell me what you think you're doing at the workshop? Knowing this about Holland, that she can envision. She has this ability to envision. And sure enough, she gives me exactly what I was imagining that she would do too, which is a beautiful thing.
It
is. As we can all imagine in relationship, it sometimes throws things awry.
I can just get ahead of myself.
Yes. Well, what I was thinking is Adrienne Marie Brown's liberated partnership thing that we talk about all the time, which is align your longings. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, we have to know our longing.
Yeah.
And you checked in with self, shared your longing, heard that he was not in alignment. Yep. And you chose not to vilify him for not being in alignment with your longing, and then continued on and made a different plan for the two of you. And I think when it comes to business, for instance, we are aligned. Mm-hmm. That's your word. Our longings are aligned when it comes to this workshop, what we hope for it, right? The feeling. And it can be really beautiful when it is. And I think that's kind of what you were saying about some of this dating openly in your early 20s, because it's not just does it align with me, it's does it align with the people I am interacting with.
Yes.
Because here at Sex Ed for You, we deeply believe that individual healing is collective healing. Knowing self is knowing you deserve to be protected and respected, and that others do too. Yeah. It is not, looking down our noses at somebody else because they can't get on your page. I had this very teary moment in my SAR, Sexual Attitude Assessment, reassessment at school, where I was just sobbing once. And they do this on purpose. It's 3 days of intensive work where you really look at your shadow. And I was sobbing because at that point in my journey, I was still rapidly healing from my decade of really traumatizing relationship. And I was saying, I don't know if I could do non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy and consensual non-monogamy because of this, and this. And they were like, Lauren, that's knowing your edges. That is not saying that you despise it or that it is wrong or that it is evil. That is knowing that something could be right for somebody and not right for you. Mm-hmm. And I think in these types of conversations, such as Helen loves them, it's so important to talk about this, that it's one thing to know your longings. It's another thing to judge somebody because they don't align with yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just so much open conversation. And open conversation with self, I think, is where it starts. Mm-hmm. You can come to us and ask, what do you think is better to do in your early 20s? Sure. I recommend doing that in an individual session. But you also really need to have a conversation with yourself first. What do I want out of my early 20s? Do I want to learn what I'm like in partnership? Do I want to learn my attachment style? And do I want to heal through partnership? Because as we've said a million times, sometimes when you go into deep partnership and you feel that felt safety, you start reworking through traumas and things that come up. That's a beautiful thing to do in your early 20s. That is a lot of what I did in my in one of my long-term relationships. And it was needed. And it is, I guarantee you, it is the reason I am in this chair right now. If I had not dated that person, I would not be here. And that is incredible. Mm-hmm. But that is my story. Mm-hmm. And your story might be completely different. You might find your personhood and who you want to be and your purpose and your desire and your longing for, open relationships and polyamory through casual dating. Because I've done that too. So it's you can learn all sorts of different things. I just think it's you really got to check in with yourself. I didn't do that before my long-term relationship. I just got into it. Mm-hmm. But as we were working through things, I was like, oh yes, this is what I wanted. This is the relationship that I needed right now. And it became very obvious when that time was over for both of us. And that's when I began casual dating, and I learned a lot of other things through casual dating. So yeah, I just cannot emphasize enough, like, listen to yourself.
So many things coming to mind. I'm like literally trying to like list them in my head. You know, one of my favorite authors talks about this concept that we need security, felt safety, in order to begin to explore the realms of our erotic. That experience of security can happen in self, and it can happen in partnership. It can happen in polyamory. It can happen in any way. It is still a crucial piece. If we do not have a foundational sense of security, our nervous systems are going to be spiking at all times, which is not good for self. So I am never going to recommend someone do something that continues to spike their fear, their anxiety, their cortisol. I mean, we could just start listing hormones. That is not good for the body. Not good for the body. And so a fun exercise could be, okay, well, wait, am I in a season of healing and flourishing in self? And it sounds really good to go on casual dates with multiple people and see who thrills me. Sweet Trey is a perfect example of this. He went through a stage of development, and you, gentle audience, might be in this stage. So if this is you, right, as Helen said, take this as your little nugget where you're like really learning who you are. And you're like, you know what? Now I really want to learn what I'm looking for in partnership too. And I'm really realizing who I want to date. And so I'm just going to really start cultivating myself. And so he went through this season where he worked on himself a bunch. And like, that was his relationship. His primary relationship was like self-worth. And we get to do that if we desire. Then these people he was dating, he was practicing using respect with them. He was practicing having great sex with them. He was practicing communicating clearly with them, making sure that they weren't looking for these long-term partnerships either. It became really beautiful testing ground of like, how am I doing? Right? Like, do these people want to go on dates with me? Right? Can I ask them interesting enough questions about themselves that they're even intrigued? And yeah, when he met me, was had just read Ethical Slut and was so much like, no, consensual non-monogamy is my way to go. Just hilarious. To Holland's point, right? Like, you could have decided. Yeah. We had some beautiful hike in the mountains here where he was like, I really think this is what I want to do. And I was like, I hear you. I am healing. I cannot be non-monogamous right now, but not opposed. Hear you. I had just read. It was hilarious. Mating in Captivity, Esther Perel. So I had just finished Mating in Captivity. He had just finished Ethical Slut. Hilarious. It's all of these, like, should have known you would eventually be a sex educator. But yeah, we were able to have the same type of conversation you just did of, okay, well, don't know if that's where I want to go. Don't know if that's where I want to go. All right. Well, let's do a check-in.
Yep.
Let's try this and then keep doing check-ins.
So interesting. And it's just going to change.
Yes.
It's just you just kind of got to roll with life's punches. Sometimes you don't really have another choice.
Sexuality is fluid. I feel like we say this on every podcast, but sexuality is fluid.
And it's your own and everybody else's, and specific connections between two or more people are always going to change that chemistry too. Because the way you mesh with somebody may change the way you think you've been forever, you know? Like Trey, clearly.
Uh-huh.
Here we are with a married couple, with a man who thought he would never get married.
At him all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh.
He never wanted marriage.
Never.
Not once.
And so keep in mind, too, that so many of us are basing what we want and do not want, talk to me about this, on what has been modeled for us or what we've seen.
Just to think about, because there's so many different niche, like, mental predispositions we all have. And for me, it can be toxic because my parents broke up. They were engaged and broke up. And then my mom like had a different relationship, and my dad came back and they got together. My sister and her current husband, they were together for 2 or 3 years and then broke up and then got back together and got engaged and are now married. So I am a second chance Sally through and through. I am like, oh, well, everybody deserves a second chance because maybe the first time it just wasn't right and you just needed a little bit of time to get your shit together, and then you can come back and we'll all be okay. Like, I am such a second chance Sally. I am like, just come back to me when you're ready. Like, that is literally my philosophy.
You're like, doors open.
Yeah.
Porch light is on.
You got 3 chances, brother. So it's like,
I hadn't put that together.
And it is
This is fascinating.
It's so stuck in my head of like, everybody deserves a second chance.
Well, and in some way I believe that's beautiful. Yeah. Like that is
But also, Holland, stop believing that people are just going to be great the second time they come back to you.
Yeah.
Just because they come back doesn't mean they're healed. Like, it is not true. But I want you to think about the relationships that you've seen in your life.
Yeah.
And like, well, how do you think that's affected the way you've seen relationships? Because I put that together in late college and I was like, oh, because almost every single person I've dated them twice. Almost every single one.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. Lauren's going through her Rolodex right now of all the people I've dated. And she's like, yeah, you have dated everybody twice.
But then I'm like, then I feel like the pot calling the kettle black, because my first husband and I broke up when he told me I was a Stepford wife and no fun. And that, yeah, he always wanted to marry his friend and I was not his friend.
And then you changed yourself.
And then I changed myself for him, then got him back. And then Trey also broke up with me and moved his ass across the country.
Second chance Sally, baby.
So I'm going to shut up.
But it makes me think about, the like your own ideas of how relationships may work, or what you're quote unquote supposed to do, or what it's supposed to look like. Let the supposed to go.
Ooh. Okay. Here's a question for you, because this is talked about in the Poly book that I'm rereading again. Which is easier? Monogamy or non-monogamy?
Which is easier? Neither. The fuck kind of question is that?
That's a stupid question to ask, Holland. So many people, will say, no, go ahead.
I think people are going to say non-monogamy is harder. I think, honestly, they might be wrong. I think they're equally as difficult, yes.
For what reasons? What come to your mind as for this early 20s question?
Yeah. For this specifically, oh gosh. If we're thinking specifically early 20s, non-monogamy or monogamy, again, I'm not going to say either is easier or more difficult, because I think they're equally. Because with monogamy, you're focusing on one person. Everybody at some point gets the ick. Everybody at some point is having to deal with something that they don't like about their partner. You get out of the honeymoon phase at some point, and then you have to realize, like, do I actually want this person? Do I want to commit to this? So that's monogamy. And like, obviously not dating other people is hard to some people. And there's all sorts of, the typical run of the mill. Everybody knows it because it's on every TV show ever. And we've all been baby fed it with a spoon since we were kids.
Right.
Those are the issues that you're going to get with monogamy. Okay. With non-monogamy, it's a lot more communication.
So much communication.
It's introducing people to your current partner. It's traipsing through the waters of jealousy, of time is a, constrained thing. So they're both, I think they're just different. I mean, which one do you want to deal with? Do you want to learn to love somebody through hell and high water? Or do you want to learn to love somebody through their other relationships and your other relationships? It's really just, what do you want?
Our favorite thing, choice. I thought it was a beautiful question. I think so many people assume, which I would have, she talks about that so many people assume, and maybe we can make this the poll, that non-monogamy can be easier because it's like you're not having to worry about wanting to cheat but not being able to cheat. It's like, oh, I can just sleep with whoever I want to. That trope is broken. That's not what non-monogamy, especially consensual non-monogamy that we would be advocating for, looks like. Let me break down what consensual non-monogamy looks like. That is so much communication. That is letting every partner that you are intimate with know exactly where you stand. Primary reason, public health and sexual health. People who you are mushing genitals with need to and deserve to get to know how many other people you are mushing genitals with. You need to be using protection. You need to be having beautiful conversations. Your choice, fine. But if you are bringing one thing to another person, that's not okay. It's as simple as, y'all, if you are sleeping with someone who has a cat and the other person you're sleeping with is allergic to cats, please don't view this as we are saying, ooh, it is not.
No.
It is simply kindness and respect. That sharing things that someone doesn't know about is unethical. That's not okay. So A, communication about that part, but then B, even when it comes to, and Holland was saying this before, time, letting someone know that they are still important. This is still a relatively new thing in this world, that, you are not with them tonight. You're not going on a date with them tonight because you're going on a date with so-and-so. That is fine. You just need to be able to say that, because what consensual non-monogamy is not is lying in deceit, is sneaking around, is not telling so-and-so that you're dating.
Which I think removes the glamour that a lot of people think that it has. Not necessarily glamour, but that's the eroticism from one of the 4 cornerstones. It's, it
could be so many, but violating prohibitions.
Prohibitions. That left my brain for a minute. But yeah, once you take away the fact that you're not lying and sneaking and getting the adrenaline, no, you have to have these conversations for it to be ethical, not monogamy. And then you get into too, like, do you have a primary partner?
Right.
Do you have a second? And what does that mean for the other partners? It's just a lot of talking.
You could work with a sexuality educator, just saying. And we could talk about hierarchical models of consensual non-monogamy versus non-hierarchical models. There's beautiful ways to think through this. It's just work.
It's work.
Holland and I were saying earlier, one of my favorite quotes from, I think it's the book Erotic Interludes, says that the ideal fantasy partner is the one who is able to maintain the fantasy. Okay? So as soon as you pop that bubble and you are now consensually communicating, there's no fantasy bubble.
Yep.
So if you're living in the world of, wow, that sounds so hot. It can be hot. It can be great. It can be ethically hot. Right? The hotness doesn't come from the secrecy. The hotness comes from people consensually, like open-heartedly saying, yes, I am filled with joy that this person I sleep with is now sleeping with so-and-so, and I am rejoicing in it.
Yeah.
And if that sounds juicy to you, then consensual non-monogamy might be right for you. If you are full of compersion, which is taking the joy in somebody else's joy, go for it. This might be absolutely for you. I was talking with a client the other day who, this was a story from their youth of they were friends with benefits with someone, and they would have these incredible sexual encounters, and then their partner would say, could I show this to this other person I'm dating? And they'd be like, yes. And then they would like talk afterwards, like, oh my God, I got to do that with them. And they thought it was phenomenal. And they took joy in that. And I was like, is that when you knew that this would be your lifestyle? And they were like, no. And I said, like, look at you. That's phenomenal. That's compersion. That is compersion. So if that is you and you have such an abundance of that, that might be a good place for you. But it's not sneaking.
No. And that takes away some of the sparkle for I think a lot of people. On your parade, people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who is committed partnership in their early 20s for?
Who is it for?
Who's it good for?
Oh. Ooh. People that want it. Sorry, guys. Can't give you a type. I think, I'm going to go solely based off of what I know from personal experience here, because I don't work with clients every day like Lauren does.
It's really cool. I love you all so much.
I love you so much. I love you too. I just look at your names on a screen. So
they say they love you too. My favorite is when one of you comes in. And you're like, will you tell Helen thank you for that thing she said on the podcast? I'm like, yes, I will.
And I'm just like, la-di-da-di-da.
I do tell her. I do. I really do.
I would say, based off of my experience, it's for somebody who wants to pursue long-term relationship,
Okay.
who wants to pursue marriage, who like sees themselves getting into a monogamous long-term relationship. Okay. I think it could also be for people who want to know what they're like in relationship, whether that be monogamy or non-monogamy, but like learning, because you do change in partnership. You become, if you're cohabitating, if you're even just dating, like you change a little bit.
Yep.
And I think it's important to know what you're like in that kind of way. Because I've seen some people really lose themselves in relationship. And if that's you, maybe it's time to look at who I am independently of relationships and how do I become someone who is okay with who I am within and without relationship. I think it's important to know what you're willing to lose of yourself within relationship. And I don't mean like, lose your entire being, but like you have to compromise. That's a lot of relationship is compromise. And so it's kind of like learning, what are you okay with giving? What are you okay with receiving? I think there's a lot of things that you can learn in long-term partnership and a lot of things you can learn in monogamy, but you also have to be willing to learn. So
I loved that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think if you're in your early 20s and career is really your goal, I was thinking about this too, and really dating the field sounds like such a weird term, but sounds exhausting to you right now, and you have someone, kind of like Holland was saying, where you're not the person's forever thing, but you're really passionate about your career right now, and you love like sharing space with this person,
having cuddles at the end of the day, and somebody to cook you dinner.
My God, can we just normalize more relationships like this? Now, should everybody be on the same page?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's really important to have that conversation.
It's really, really important. It could be that you are glorified roommates, but could everybody know that? Could everybody know, hey, I really enjoy this season with you and I'd like to continue. I don't think I want to be with you forever. Yeah. If you also feel that way and comfortable with that, great. And we've got to get bolder at saying things like this and not lead, because it's leading people on.
It is.
And yet I see you, early young professional, like wanting the cuddles and the companionships and the TV watching and like having your show and these types of things. It is the best.
It is.
My best friend and I talk about it all the time. That is one of the biggest perks of long-term partnership is like the person you watch the show with. And I see it. I do. I do wish too we normalized just living with people like for fun and platonically, and did more cuddle puddles and did more just affectionate stuff within boundaries, because I think we all deserve community and belonging. But yeah, I think that's another time monogamy might be fine. Yeah. Like I've known people who really weren't in a season of pursuing another human and knew that it was career time for them. Like really were loving building a business or going to school and, becoming a therapist. Like, I've known those people and they don't have the energy to invest in partnership with what they know they want to.
Yeah. But need like the comfort.
It. Yeah. And like have a person for that.
I was thinking earlier, a good question to ask yourself would be, how do you feel about first dates? Just because I know so many people who despise first dates, who hate them. And you see all of those funny like reels about when it goes from, the quote is, when it goes from like love to what's your favorite color. And it's a hard change when you go from being in a long-term relationship and a breakup and then you go into first dates. How do you feel about first dates? Because if you want non-monogamy, you got a lot of first dates ahead of you. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting way to ponder.
Love that.
Yeah.
that, back to my sweet little partner, that was exactly what he was practicing, was, can I get enough reps in where it does not make me as anxious, where I can sit down with a human and see them as a human.
Yeah.
And make them laugh was his only goal.
And what does dating practice look like?
Right?
Like, do you enjoy texting? Do you enjoy calling? Do you enjoy, I don't know, FaceTiming? I hate when people try to FaceTime me. It makes me feel weird. So, like, it's really, I don't know. These are fun things to know about yourself. And I think it's questions that we just don't think to ask. So, find questions to ask yourself.
Some great books. Polysecure, wonderful one. It's even got a workbook along with it. Ethical Slut, Sex at Dawn. Like, if you really want to, like, kind of go into the origins of where did long-term partnership and monogamy even come from, Sex at Dawn is really good for it. If you just want to kind of shake up your brain, get an anthology of sorts. I think it's good sometimes. Like we were saying, so often we're either wanting to emulate models or go far away from those models. But sometimes it's nice to see where the models even fucking came from.
And then create your own.
Yes.
Think about it, because like these models didn't just come out of nowhere.
No.
These models happened because people were living their lives.
Yes.
And so you have to acknowledge A, that models are imperfect, B, that you can create your own models, and C, that life is probably going to fuck up your model anyway. And you just kind of got to go with it. But
that's the best soundbite ever.
make your own model.
Yes.
And like genuinely think about what you want. This society does not encourage us to genuinely sit and think about what we want. And I think that is the most important thing you can do before going into any type of relationship, whether that be monogamous or non-monogamous.
We've talked before, haven't we, about the relationship escalator?
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't this fit
We can talk
so
about it
nicely?
again.
Okay, so ironically, poly communities came up with this for us, who were like, wait a second. It's like everybody thinks they have to get on the escalator. And so I love this question for early 20s. For a long time in the United States of America was the time to be finding your spouse, finding your job, buying your first home. So much in your early 20s. It's that
whole how not being married by 30 is terrifying for
an old maid,
so many people. Yeah.
Right? Oh, and so we'll post it again, but the graphic is, if you can just get in your minds this idea of an escalator and you get on and you can't get off. I would love for everyone to challenge that expectation. That, no, what do you want? Get off the fucking escalator, take the stairs and go back a few steps. And then, I don't know, get off at a certain floor and then stand on the landing and then go back down and go back up. It doesn't serve anyone when we're just on an escalator, because it's not, what do I want? It's, oh, this choice was just made for me. Yeah.
You don't have to get engaged after 2 years of dating. You don't have to have kids after 2 years of marriage. You don't have to buy a house after you've been married, or when you get married. I see so many people doing that. We're getting married, we're buying a house. And I'm like, do you have the financial means? No. So it's like all of these things, you do not have to do anything just because it's what you think is supposed to be the next step. That's the escalator. Take your time. Think about, again, what do you want? Ask yourself, ask your partner, ask your friends, what do you think I want?
Ask for now and roughly 2 years. People often say your 5-year plan. I think that's bogus.
That's so far.
Life changes so much in 5 years. Do 2 in that. What could you be working on now that gets you where you want to be in 2? Because guess what? There's actually, you should get to work. If you want to be somewhere in 2 years, do it. What relationships do you need to have around you, right? If you are looking in your 20s to have a certain career by 25, yeah, you know what? Honestly, maybe committed partnership isn't the thing for you.
Yeah.
Or maybe one of these more lesser models or friends with benefits is actually really fun. I don't know if you're still with your college boyfriend, great, but maybe check in with them. Like, hey, I'm really pursuing these career goals. I don't necessarily want to break up with you, but I don't want to get married to you.
Ooh, I think we should talk about that, about relationships that have come from high school and college that are still, if you're still together after college, Lauren's making faces. I have my own opinions.
What are your opinions? Because apparently my faces were rough.
I just think we need some really deep check-ins if you're with somebody that you have been with since high school. Do you still want the same things? Are you still the same? Because I guarantee you're not the same people as you were when you met. If you met at 14, sorry, like you changed. No. You went through puberty for one, and then probably moved. And like, I don't know. I just think there needs to be some really, really, really deep, serious conversations if you're still dating somebody from high school. I think that can be fantastic. I've heard amazing stories.
Beautiful stories.
And they bring me joy. It's like, wow, how cool that you met them at your middle school. Who'd have thunk? But I do think that you need to have some harder conversations than is typically had, even in relationships that started in college. I think if they started in high school, you've got even more conversations to have, because genuinely, there is so much change that happens to a person when you're not living with your parents anymore, when you don't have siblings around anymore, when you have autonomy and you're individual. And what are your goals? Are your longings aligned? Are your desires the same? Do you feel like you are fulfilled by this partnership? I could make a whole worksheet for that.
I almost said earlier on, y'all, that by the end of this podcast, Helen's going to have a worksheet.
I really want to make one now.
The partnerships that I have seen be successful that started early on are individuals who are highly independent, where they've kind of been able to ebb and flow together. Like growth was always happening, and they all kind of had their own things, and they were growing, they were doing. It's a really neat, unique combo. And the human design nerd in me is always like, I want to see their charts. Like
maybe they're just meant to be
that, or they're like both projectors with like really low energy. And so it just kind of worked for them to kind of coexist in spaces, but they didn't exhaust one another. And they both had their kind of like nerdy pet projects. And it just kind of worked. I've seen that. It does work sometimes. It really does. So please hear me.
I went to a wedding a few months ago, and they're some of my best friends. Yeah. And it did always like perplex me. Yeah. But then like genuinely, now that we're sitting here thinking and talking about, you said with the projectors, I'm like, they've been very independent of each other.
Yes.
They have, I think that might be the key, maybe. I don't know. It's just like they always
And then I also know people who've been together since high school, and now I'm 38 and they're all divorced.
Yeah, I know.
So like, I hate to like be the Debbie Downer over here as the old lady, but like, it happens. It happens. And also, hello, as a divorced lady, it's not the end of the world. No. There's this beautiful new world that each of these people that I'm thinking of, they're like repartnered to these incredible human beings and co-parenting so beautifully, and life does not end. So also I think that we just like got to get off our high horses of like, we're a failure. We're not.
No.
Like, you're literally not.
It's the beginning of your second hill. Welcome to your second hill.
Helen said something earlier of basically like that growth is just, it is happening. And I would hope that it's always happening, and it's happening inside and outside of relationship. And, you know, this is another thing that we love about Adrienne Marie Brown's Principles of Liberated Relationships, which is in her book, Pleasure Activism. And I highly recommend it to everyone. This concept that we would like kind of just like become stagnant. No, like we should be growing in partnership. We really should. And that growth is scary sometimes. Because maybe it does expand us outside of the container. One of my favorite neuroscientists, Dr. Caroline Leaf, talks about relationships are just containers. And she's been married for 40 years to her husband, and was telling another podcast host one day, who I also like his podcast, it was a fun overlap, that she has had 4 different marriages, and that every 10 years their container has completely shattered open, and they have reassessed, do we want to still be together? And then they have rebuilt a new relationship. And I freaking love that. If we are choosing some form of long-term partnership, we better be reinventing that. We better be smashing open that container and saying, okay, what do we want to choose now? Does this still serve us in the way it did when we were teenagers? No, it's not gonna. okay, what do we need now? Is that something that we are both consensually interested in still giving and providing? Sure. Great. Fun. Great. Let's do it. Trey and I love this author and speaker, Alison Armstrong, and she says at the beginning of every one of her workshops, repeat after me, I choose partnership. So we'll just constantly say it. Do you choose partnership? Mm-hmm. That comes with certain hopes and dreams and expectations, and we should revisit every year. Every 6 months, every month.
Because if you have unspoken hopes, dreams, and expectations, they're not going to be met. No. Unspoken hopes, dreams, and expectations, you cannot expect them out of your partner. Because partnership is literally communication. That is how partnership functions. Welcome to the Communication Podcast.
We love talking about communication here at Sex Ed for You.
Because it will change your friggin' life, dude. It will change your life.
I can't explain to you how many clients sit in sessions, y'all, and they're like, what? When I start talking about Wheel of Consent, I'm like, right.
I know.
It changed my life too. To me, these conversations that we're having right now as a result of this beautiful question, thank you, gentle listener, these conversations should stir us so that we have more complex conversations inside a relationship, but then also with the world. We just closed out our amazing interns, 12-week internship. Shout out, Stacy. We love you. And we were doing some reflection time today of what were tools that she gained, that we gained through the process. And she was sharing so bravely and boldly how many transferable skills this internship provided for her. And I thought, yeah, and that's how it should be. Because the skills of how we run this business came from, other business experience, but mostly from me learning about things like the Wheel of Consent and sexuality education school.
And then teaching them to me so that I could, act that way with her.
Insane.
Yes.
Right? Like, it is important to me that we not just work with clients and give podcasts that have sexual communication content, but that also how we deal with the world looks
how we consensually communicate through this business, within this business. Like, I mean, how hypocritical would it be if we did not work as we expect and hope and teach others to consensually communicate? It's not who we are.
I was just thinking too, like terms like compersion, the joy of, our partner enjoying the body of another in a sexual encounter. If more compersion was spread around the world of us taking joy in another's joy, it would heal the world. If more work was put into asking, will you do this for me questions, or may I do this questions, we'd heal the world. So it's not just trivial. I think the things that we do with our bodies and our genitals and our words and our human relationships will heal the world. And I wish we could do more. There's so many hurting people right now in this world, but we can change at a foundational, simple level how we consensually communicate with another person.
100%.
And is it hard? And is it, kind of an eye roll to some people in this culture? Sure. Be that person. I don't know. There's community. You can come to Hemlock if you are a femme presenting person. sexedforyou.com/Hemlock. Read all about it. There are spaces where you will be championed for consensually communicating. Yeah. It might be a little more tough in the beginning. Do you think it gets easier?
Yeah, 100%. Rolls off the tongue. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's gotten to the point where, I think I said this last week, I ask my dog if I can pick him up. Mm-hmm. Like, it literally...
It's not a joke.
No.
Right.
No, it's not a joke. And it genuinely, it becomes second nature. Because think about this. How second nature is your negative mindset? Yeah. That a lot of people live by. How second nature is it for you to, I don't know, see somebody wearing something that you don't like and you immediately go like, ew. Mm-hmm. How easy is that? Mm-hmm. Because that's just something that you've been taught. You weren't born that way. These are all learned We learn things and our brain adapts to them, and that is who you are today. So if you just simply start teaching yourself positive mindsets, consensual communication, learning to ethically communicate with the people around you, it becomes second nature, and it gets less and less scary every single time, I swear. Because this conversation that I told you all about earlier between me and my friend, that conversation the first time was so hard. So hard. Because we had that conversation months and months ago, and then we had it again. And guess what? The second time, so much easier. And we just both were like gliding through the conversation, stating our needs, wants, and desires, and stating whether we were able to give the other person what they wanted. It gets easier, but it takes practice, just like any skill.
Again, a sex phrase we use all the time on this podcast, right? Sexual skills are like any other skills. They must be practiced. So must communication. And I was just thinking about all of the things we are doing right now. Again, inception. You'll be listening to this podcast while we're teaching a workshop in New York City. Wow. There are opportunities for us to practice living out our ethic, our sexual ethic every day, especially when it comes to taking joy in somebody else's joy. In this book, they go through, all of the ways in which we are afraid of polyamory and the reasons for which we are. I will not be enough. That other person will be more interesting. Getting to the core roots of jealousy in our bodies. Boy, was it beautiful for me to read again. Please know, you all, yes, sexuality is fluid, and also Holland and I are human beings too, warring through our own predispositions, our own traumas, our own woundings. And it was just such a beautiful check to read some of these things and see, okay, so if the sexual attitude reassessment in school triggered me this way and had me come to this realization, okay, so now we're this many years removed from that. Wow. Okay. Yeah. That one's not even an issue anymore, but this one still is. Okay. Knowing ourselves, which is what Holland so beautifully said in the beginning, is such an important part of it. Doing the work on self and saying, what am I healed enough at this point in my life to interact with? What is just part of erotic fantasy, which is fine. You know how we love fantasy here. What am I willing to give time to consensually communicate through? That's cool. Do I feel tons of compersion in my body for the sexual play of everybody I am also sexual with? Do I have a good relationship with my local clinic or health department to get tested all the time? Does that feel super simple to me? Is protection great for me, right? We didn't even mention that, right? Who is an open relationship for and a monogamous relationship for? If you really hate condoms and you want to just be with one sexual partner, that's really okay, right? It really is, as long as preventative measures are be taken against pregnancy. Then consensual non-monogamy might not be for you. There's literal, check-ins are necessary. And we can grow and become. We really can. Any other things? This was such a good conversation.
This was beautiful. Mostly, I think people should know themselves. I think that's the general memo of this entire thing. I love not giving you a yes/no answer. And I love telling you to go home and think about it. So go home and think about it. And if you think about it hard enough that you end up wanting to talk about it, maybe you should go to sexedforyou.com/free consult and request a free consult, because I know somebody that you can talk to. She has brown hair and she's dancing at the moment. So
she's wearing an orgasmic mother shirt.
Yes. She would love to talk to you about knowing yourself and about what kind of relationship would work for you and whether or not monogamy is right for you in this stage and all of these types of things. Lauren loves those things. So I suggest speaking to her and paying her to do it. So
we do believe in that.
We do believe in that. Anything else that you wanted to add?
No. I think this was such a beautiful, nuanced conversation, and I hope it provided some different perspectives. And, homework for the audience is Yeah, to look at the things that have been modeled for you, to really consider, are you just on an escalator?
Yeah.
Or do you really have an interest in, ethically walking into what it could look like to allow yourself to experience pleasure with multiple people in a season and to be full of joy for their pleasure as well? Or are you looking for ease or companionship or cuddles in a show? These are beautiful questions. I recommend grabbing a journal and writing them down, or talking with a friend. Send this podcast to someone and say, can we go to dinner and talk about this? Can we go on a walk and talk about this? I would love if you all would share this podcast. Do you know what else helps is when you rate it and you leave a comment, like a feedback. This podcast is reaching who it needs to reach, and we feel pretty confident in that. But it really helps when you authentically and organically comment and share with your friends. That's the only way we really want this to grow. Sure, we'll do the other stuff when it's right and when we're responding to it. But if this really was an interesting conversation for you today and you'd like to push into it, share it with someone. Like Holland said, feel free to schedule a free consult. Also, reference any of the books we mentioned on this podcast. There were a lot. There's beautiful stuff out there, and you're not alone. And so proud of each of our audience members for really asking these types of questions. Y'all, the questions in the question boxes were so good, like so varied. We can't wait to talk about all of them. So again, follow us on Instagram at sex_ed_for_you. Send us a message if ever you want us to talk about something. And remember that these are opinions and thoughts, and that you get to make your own informed decisions, and you have a right to self-determination. This is not the end all be all. This is not like the correct way to do things. Have a great, great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
I'm going to do the other one.
Okay.
Can't even.
You're literally doing it the same. Did you mean this one?
What did you do the first time? I do it this way.
I do it that way too. This is the new way, and it weirds me out.
It makes my fingers hurt. Bye, y'all.
Anyway, bye.